So, oh, sorry. Should I start over? Yeah. I should probably make that announcement about Jeff again. So it's recorded. Welcome, everybody. I'm Boyd Davis. I'm the chair this year, but I'm going to turn it over to Sam, if that's possible. He said he wants to be the chair really bad, but he can't. Welcome to West Point City. We're glad that we could host the meeting out here today. And I think we're hoping to maybe we can continue to do it here at West Point, or we can rotate around cities. We are doing this as a hybrid meeting, like was stated. So please use the microphones if you need to say something, so our participants at home or at the office can listen in. So I guess we just jump right into it. Ben, is anything else we need to say before we start? Okay, Ben's really in charge, so I'll just turn to him for anything. Okay, first item is an action item to approve the October 19th meeting minutes. And we've all read those minutes. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve those minutes? Okay, that was a motion by Jeff Euler. He already broke the rule. Do we have a second? Second? With what city? Layton City, okay. And Jeff Euler's with Davis County. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? And what should we do for those online? Yeah, we'll just ask for any opposing votes. Are there any opposing votes, either in person or online? Okay, the minutes are approved. So we'll move into our, there is one other item before we move on. Rosie with Wasatch Front Regional Council brought some treats in the back. So thank you, Rosie. And everybody make sure you take a cookie and some water. And those at the office, we're sorry. So the next item is legislative heads up by Miranda Cox. Is Miranda online?
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit today about what's happening up here at the legislative session. Yesterday, the session started, and it's a 45-day session. We don't have a full-time legislature, and so it's only a few short weeks that lawmakers are meeting to pass bills, to spend the state's budget, and we're up here actively involved and watching what's going on and advocating for the different needs out there. So I just want to provide a little bit of context for you all, things to keep in mind if you're wanting to know more about what's happening up here, and to just orient you with some of the big issues that are happening right now. So first of all, just to orient you with where we're at in the legislative session, the first several weeks, about 2 to 3 weeks of the session, are when the appropriations subcommittees meet. So actually right now, and that's where I just came from, the appropriations committees hear the budget requests from different state agencies, different community partners, and then ultimately rank and decide whether or not something should be funded. That then goes to the Executive Appropriations Committee as they kind of finalize the pieces of the state budget. So right now, the Utah Department of Transportation is actually presenting their different budget requests to the Infrastructure and General Government Subcommittee. So I'll maybe get into some of those things that they are presenting a little bit later, but just know that that's happening right now. And then simultaneously, the legislature also meets in their standing committees where they'll hear different bills. They'll get to discuss those bills and ultimately vote on whether or not those should pass before it goes to the Senate and the House for a larger vote. So a few things, and I'm going to pull up my screen here to show you something that might be helpful if you are interested in learning more. At WFRC, we actually have a bill tracker that might be worth taking a look at if you're interested in seeing what bills are out there related to transportation issues, growth, housing, air quality, all of these areas that intersect with transportation. And so here is our bill tracker, and you can go in, and it's not fully baked out yet because there's still a lot of bills being released and trickling in, but there are a few that have been released that might be worth looking at. So for example, here there's a emissions reduction bill. There's also some transportation related bills down here at the bottom. For example, this corridor funding amendment, which would basically allow the Department of Transportation to preserve corridors more than 30 years out into the future, and now would be 40 years out to plan for that. So anyways, it's definitely a helpful tool. We keep it pretty up to date regularly and almost daily. So would definitely recommend taking a look at that. I also send out weekly government affairs emails that kind of highlight what happened at the session this week. And so if you're ever interested in getting on that and learning more, reach out to Rosie and she'd be happy to add you to those email lists. And then on top of that, our partners at the League of Cities and Towns, which hopefully some of you are your cities are involved with, they do a really great job at tracking a lot of these issues. And yes, Kip, I can put that tracker in the chat, or maybe Rosie, if you have access, you can add the tracker into the chat. So to kind of go back to priorities, the legislature has indicated that they have a top few priorities this year, not entirely transportation related, but I just want to run through those quickly because you'll probably hear a lot about them. One is water. Very understandably, that tends to be the big issue more and more these days. Education, specifically teacher pay, housing affordability, which again, another big issue that continues to, continues to be where all of these entities, all of us put a lot of our effort into. And then lastly is taxes. The legislature and the governor have proposed tax cuts, and we're anticipating to see that. I'm not entirely sure what that will look like just yet, but I think it's almost certain that that will likely happen. In regards to transportation issues that we're keeping an eye on, and I'll kind of wrap up here with things that you should also, would be helpful for you to be aware of, is transportation funding as it relates to multimodal transportation funding. So active transportation, transit, and roads. Most of these items were included in the governor's recommended budget, and now the legislature is determining whether this is something that they want to invest in. But first, for active transportation is the Utah statewide trail network. You all likely saw UDOT and the governor's joint press release or announcement on this. The idea is a connecting network of paved non-motorized trails to connect our different communities, to provide greater access for individuals, to give people an alternate mode of commuting and transportation. And so this is one we're really excited about. The legislature has put money towards active transportation over the last 2 years, as some of you may know, but historically hasn't been something that they've funded. And this would provide funding on an ongoing basis, which would be huge. So that's one we're very excited about. Second, so transit, our second pillar of multimodal transportation. In the governor's budget, there was $100 million for Point of the Mountain transit solution. At one point that was bus rapid transit. There's discussions on whether that might be rail. That's still to be determined, but the legislature has put money aside for that in the past and may continue to do more this session. Front runner, the Senate president even spoke about this yesterday, saying that he has a heavy and a big interest in the double tracking of front runner and making front runner as efficient and fast as it can be. So we may potentially see additional investment from the state towards Frontrunner, though that project is working through the capital investment grant with the feds right now to also receive additional funding. And then lastly, on the transit side of things is zero fare 1-year pilot. This was also included in the governor's budget and would provide a 1-year statewide transit pilot of zero fare to further study the impact of what zero fare would look like. This is kind of coming off of high gas prices, but also off of Free Fare February from last year and how successful that was. And so I would say that the legislature may not be as receptive to that idea as the governor is, but we'll see ultimately where that lands. And then lastly, the governor proposed money to pay down transportation bonding debt, as opposed to putting a ton of money into roads. Over the past several years, the legislature has put over $2 billion of one-time money toward the Transportation Commission to program out funding for road projects. And in the governor's budget, and the legislature may also like this idea, is to pay down some of the existing debt that the Department of Transportation has for roads. And so ultimately, we'll see where that happens. It's usually inevitable that individual transportation projects kind of crop up during legislative session. So we may see that happen as well. But we've heard from certain legislative leaders that they want to kind of keep the process holistic and have it go through the Transportation Commission. And so that's kind of the things we're watching, in addition to a number of other things. There's a lot of bills out there that we're keeping an eye on. Senator Harper and Representative Schultz are kind of our key transportation legislators here in the legislature. They also are members of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And so there's a number of bills that we're working on with them. But as I said, if you're interested in hearing more about those bills, following along with how those are impacting this space in transportation, the bill tracker, as well as those government affairs emails, would be helpful in watching that. So would be happy to answer any questions if you guys have them. And if not, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'll put my email in the chat. So.
Great, thank you, Miranda. Does anybody have any questions for her?
Okay, thanks everyone. I appreciate it. I'm going to drop off now, but thanks for letting me join you today.
Thanks, Miranda. Okay, next item is an update on the I-15 EIS by Tiffany, how do you say the last name? Pocock. Tiffany, are you online? I think I did see her earlier. Tiffany, can you hear us? Would it be okay if, what's that? Oh yeah, let's check. You don't see her on the participant?
I'm
Looks like
not seeing her online.
Okay, it looks like she must have dropped off. So if she comes back, we'll go back to that item later. But the next item is Ben Wuthrich with the review of the concept reports for projects received. So Ben, take it away.
Man, this makes you feel kind of little. Awesome. So the sheet that's coming around, and then also online, Rosie, I didn't even think about it there. If we can put that file on there so that those online can access, there should be a file. We'll give just a minute for this sheet to get around to everybody. This is a list of the project concept reports that were received. And as you'll remember, reflect back, so normally each year we've had the 3 funding sources. We've had the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, or the CMAQ funds. We've had the Surface Transportation Program, or SDP funds. We've had the TAP, which is a Transportation Alternatives Program. And then last year or this year, initiating the Carbon Reduction Program. So the way that these files are sent out, and these are all the ones that were submitted in the Ogden-Layton urban area, which is essentially from Brigham City down to Salt Lake. We've sorted them first by the CMAQ project. So the first 6 projects that you see on the list there are the congestion mitigation air quality projects that have been submitted for evaluation. And then the green colored ones, the 4 on the bottom of the page, and then the 4 on the next page are those projects or the concept reports that were submitted for the congestion reduction program, or sorry, the carbon reduction program. And then we have the projects that were submitted for SDP consideration, and that's the bottom of the 2nd page, the front of the 3rd page, and the back of the 3rd page. And then the very last page shows those projects that were submitted for evaluation through the TAP program. Now, the purpose for bringing this list to everyone and making this available for you is so that you can search into the list, make sure that we've got all the concept reports that were intended to be submitted, that something hasn't been lost or misplaced. So again, the way they're sorted is by funding source, then by the county they're located in, and then the city. So please take an opportunity there to look at that. Now, if we can jump to that presentation. Yes. Yeah. Did anyone online have any questions, or does anybody have any questions? Terrific. So if your project's not on the list, will you please give me a heads up? Let me know that as quickly as possible. Maybe if we can start on slide 4, Rosie. So where we are where we are right now then in the presentation or in the process is we're in the project review and evaluation. So these concept reports were due back in the early part of December. Since that time, we've been making sure that we've got the proper information, that we've got the information. There's still questions that we may have as we get into the evaluation process, that we will be reaching out to each of the project concept submitters to get the information if we have any questions. We'll also be organizing a field review. And as you'll recall last year, especially in the Salt Lake West Valley TAC, it was recommended that we involve the TAC more in our field reviews. And as you'll recall, these past couple of years with the COVID experience, we have had a virtual field review where we've had a couple of us out on site, and then the rest of it has been online. And we are proposing that we'll make that available for the TAC committee, with the understanding that as we are out on site and when we pull up the camera and we're out there, if we get too many questions, it'll slow us up. So we kind of want to caution that. We may have a moderator back at the office. We're still looking through the details, that you can type in a question in the chat. Then we can address them either between routes as we're going from one project to the next. We'll try to have a timeline there so that you can, if there's something of interest, you can join us at a particular time, or if you've got conflicting meetings, so that you're able to join here and there. And then we'll be able to have the open discussions on the projects when we're on site and through the evaluation. So there's quite a few in the chat. Is that any questions pertaining to? Oh, good. Thank you, Rosie. So then if we can go, so looking at this schedule here, then you'll see that we've got In our project evaluation over the next 3 months, if we can go to the next slide, you'll know or be aware that in February we have what we refer to as the roadshow, where we're going to have essentially a slide on every project, and we'll run through all of these projects in a slide form so that you're familiar with projects that we're going through the evaluation process. Then in March, we're proposing that that be an in-person meeting, and the reason for that is a lot of input from you. But this is when we have the discussion as to which projects we move forward in the program. And as discussed, we feel that that would be a lot more formalized if we're here in person, that we'll be able to have the conversations and the discussions necessary to identify and recommend to TransCom those projects that this body think or feel are appropriate and necessary to move forward. So we'll have quite a few projects to evaluate this year. It'll be an exciting opportunity for all of us. You'll notice as you go through some of these projects that there's projects that are eligible for multiple fundings, whether that's in the SDP, the CMAC, and the CRP, or the CRP and the TAP, and or the CMAC. And so there's a lot of opportunities we have to move projects around to identify good projects for the program. So we really need your participation and your involvement in the next 2 months of meetings as we involve the Technical Advisory Committee with the review and evaluation. Are there any questions? Perfect. Thank you, everybody. If you have a project that's not on the list, please let me know. Thanks, Boyd.
Okay, that was quick. Thanks, Ben. So next item is Hugh Van Wagenen with the Active Transportation Facility Coordination. Hugh, take it away.
Hear me? Is that right? So formal. And if you, Ben, if you feel small, I feel miniature up here. I think Rosie's going to pull that up for me. Nice to see everybody. And I appreciate the few minutes today to just talk to you about some walking and bicycling safety resources. And Rosie, can I just tell you when to go next slide? Perfect. So next slide. And many of you are probably aware of the really tragic trends that we've been seeing over the last couple of years, specifically with people biking and walking and the fatalities and serious injuries that are occurring. This is just a snapshot of 2022. And you can see on the left, it's people biking who've been hit and killed, and on the right, people walking. So well above not just the previous year, but also the 5-year averages that have been happening, right? And so obviously just terrible to see, and trying to figure out what's going on. But again, this isn't necessarily a new problem. It's just been exacerbated recently. So things we can do, as transportation professionals, to help curb this trend and make sure people are getting home safe at night to their families, after work or running errands or whatever it is, or kids coming home from school. We've seen all sorts of different types of crashes and deaths this last year. Rosie, next slide, please. So something maybe you've heard of is the safe system approach. It's being pushed by FHWA. It comes out of a Vision Zero sort of framework internationally, and is built on 6 principles, and then goes into some more elements of what a safe system is. I'll just jump into these really briefly. If you can go to the next slide, Rosie. Obviously, there's so much here, right? I'm just giving you a real brief overview. But the 6 principles of a safe system, right? Death and serious injury is unacceptable, meaning every time this happens, we don't just have to chalk it up to the cost of traveling in our systems, right? Humans make mistakes. We can't seem to get around that as often as we try. We're clearly vulnerable, right? Whether we're even inside vehicles, but especially outside of vehicles, to crashes when those happen. Shared responsibility, it's not just on the individual user. Safety is proactive. I know in the past, right, we've often talked about hotspots and sort of chasing crashes down and improving those areas. There's a real big focus on being proactive and getting there and improving those areas before those crashes happen. And then redundancy. Next slide, please. So the elements, this was the core of that circle diagram, right? Talking about safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. And I would argue, and I think you'd all agree, that the sphere of influence that we have in this room, particularly, Rosie, click, have to do with safe speeds, and click again, safe roads. And so these are areas that, you know, again, as transportation professionals, we can dial in on. Next slide, please. And go ahead and click here. So again, if you're thinking about this or been exposed to this, traditional sort of approach to safety is prevent crashes altogether. Well, maybe we're less concerned about crashes and just more concerned about the serious injuries and ones that are causing death, right? And we can deal with crashes here, the more minimal one. Improving human behaviors proved to be very difficult. So how do we design knowing that mistakes are going to be made and the limits with which our bodies can take the impacts of those crashes? Control speeding, right, which is not the same as speed, but, well, rather we have to talk about speed itself and reducing system kinetic energy. Not just saying, hey, you're an individual participating in the system, you need to be careful, you need to be responsible for your decisions, right? Not solely putting it there, but saying, hey, we know people are going to make mistakes, and share, and how can we all share in designing and operating the system responsibly. And again, mention the react on crash history and proactively identifying risk on roads. Next slide, please. So one resource that is out there and has been out there for a little bit, but contributes to the safe system approach, specifically when it comes to pedestrian safety, is the STEP program, Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian. Again, I won't go into this a whole lot, but raise your hands either online or in the room if you've heard of the STEP program at all. Okay, great. Next slide, please, Rosie. So one of the things it does, right, it talks about the proven safety countermeasures for pedestrians. A lot of this has to do with crossing roadways, right, as opposed to along roadways when it comes to pedestrian safety, but also a little bit on walkways. And so it takes these countermeasures and sort of says, here are all the available options, right? These are the ones that have some research and some time behind them. We know they're helpful in improving safety. Next slide, please. And okay, so what's the situation of the roadway, right? And you can walk through and say, well, yeah, we have a 3-lane without a raised median, right? It's the ADT, these are the speeds. And then with the circles, right, it'll tell you, well, these are the appropriate treatments you should think about, right, to help improve pedestrian safety. And the next slide tells you, and if you do that, here are the things that you can address, right, the safety issues you can address. So again, a resource, real quick overview of that when it comes to STEP, but there are things there that can help us identify and walk through situations that will help improve pedestrian safety. Next slide, please. Also with bikeway selection. So I know, right, a lot of the projects that have been submitted to Ben, a lot of widening projects, reconstruction projects, and there's opportunities to improve the active transportation facilities along those roadways. Next slide, please. So as we're thinking about this, right, there's some guidance here on what is the safest bicycle facility according to the roadway characteristics. And I do want to mention, typically when you put in bicycle facilities along a roadway, that helps with the pedestrian environment as well. There's that much more separation between the people walking and vehicles on the road because of the bicycle infrastructure. But if you're familiar with a shared lane or a bike boulevard, right? So bikes and vehicles are operating in the same space. You know, anything above 3,000 cars a day or 25 miles per hour, you probably don't want to be using those types of treatments. A bike lane, again, a buffered bike lane, even if just painted, you know, 6,500 cars a day, you know, a little over 30 miles an hour. That's probably your limit of having, you know, a safe facility for most users. And when you're getting into that 7,000 and 35 mile an hour range, you really want to separate the users, right? So this is a starting point. It's just saying, tell us about your roadway. Well, this is the type of bike facility you should really be thinking about. And then through the guide, it can walk you through all the trade-offs and what you have to think about. And I understand there's a lot that goes on here, right? How much space do you have? What cost do you have in your project and whatnot? But if we're not starting at the point where we say this is the safest facility based on the roadway characteristics, then we're already starting at a deficit, and we're not going to help improve the safety of people biking and walking. Next slide, please. Again, some just nice diagrams, right? Talk about intersection treatments as well. Intersections are always really tricky. There's a very specific guide that from NACDO that says don't give up at the intersection. But you can see this is just an example of conflict points and exposure for bikes in a conventional bike lane, shared lanes through an intersection compared to a separated bike lane in a mixing zone. It still has some exposure. Bike lanes through roundabouts, separated bike lanes, I should say, be very clear. And then, protected intersection. There's all sorts of examples about how this works in this bikeway selection guide, and there are a lot of resources out there. Next slide, please. Again, sorts of charts are talking about what type of forgiveness and safety can be accommodated based on the type of bicycle facility. What are your goals, and what is it going to do for you? Next slide. These will all be available in the meeting minutes afterwards. Key crash types associated with the bikeway type in an intersection, right? So if you're doing shared lanes, bike boulevards, shoulders, bike lanes, well, there's a lot of crash types associated with that through an intersection. Once you get to that separated bike lane and different iterations of that, there's crash type risk really decreases. Next slide, please, Rosie. So just generally speaking, larger safety efforts that are going on in the region, the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant application that WFRC has in, we're hoping to hear this month. And if you're have not been able to participate in that, looking for participation, it's going to develop a comprehensive safety action plan for our whole region. And once that plan is in place, then any municipality, right, that is within our region can apply directly to FHWA for implementation grants. So by setting this up, it's making you eligible for those grants. And Wayne and Kip have been leading that. Recent federal legislation is requiring all the state DOTs to do a vulnerable road user safety assessment. UDOT's just kicked that off. Robert Miles with UDOT Safety is the lead on that. And then some of you may have seen the recent announcement by Salt Lake City to become a Vision Zero city, right? Really focusing on, again, this safe system approach. The things I referenced in some of those slides are linked in the presentation that'll get sent out. Again, this is just tip of the iceberg with stuff that's there. So encourage everybody, especially again, with all these projects you have coming online, it's a great opportunity rather than going back and retrofitting. If you're doing a widening, if you're doing a reconstruction, it's a wonderful opportunity to look at improved safety for bicycle and pedestrian facilities with those projects. Unless there are questions, thank you for your time. Wayne just said for those online, we'll send out these slides in the next little bit.
Hey, thank you, Hugh. Thanks for the good information. The next item was Sunset City, but we're not seeing anybody here with Sunset. Is there anybody online with Sunset City? Okay. I guess they get the same assignment next time. No, actually, Syracuse is on for the next meeting. Is that correct, Ben? February 22nd. Syracuse will do a project report and refreshments. So Mike, don't forget the refreshment. We don't care about the report, but we want the refreshment. And we also, Ben got a message from Tiffany Pocock. She had to drop off for a different meeting, but she will provide a website for an update on the I-15 EIS. And if we've got that, we can put in the chat or, okay, I guess we can email that out later. So any other business? One item, is everybody okay with this location for the meeting? Does this work okay for all of them, or we can rotate around? What's at least this year? And I think, yeah, go ahead. Oh, yes, the microphone, please. They can't hear you online.
Hello, hello.
Make sure you turn on. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so just a general commentary. This is for Ben and Wayne and everybody. I think we should continue to encourage to have these meetings in person. It's been so long since I've seen some of my comrades. I'm forgetting people's names and I think it's time to get back to having you pay attention when you come in person. When I get online in my office, especially these big meetings when there's a lot of people online, I don't pay attention to anything that's going on. I'm doing whatever else I need to do in the office. So I think it's valuable to have these meetings in person, and I hope other people feel that way, but I think we should encourage to continue to move in that direction to get people back in person in these meetings.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't always agree with Jeff, but I agree this time. Yeah, and I tend to enjoy this the in-person meeting myself. Any other comments about that? And
This is Alma. I attempted in person, but came to the wrong location because I didn't check ahead of time. So having the option for a virtual allowed me to attend. Otherwise, I would have not been able to make it with the drive time due to my own error. But I do like the hybrid. I agree. I like being in person as much as possible. But when you can't be, this is a good option.
okay, sorry we missed you, Alma. We'll give you a better
I'll pay better
directions.
attention.
And Ben and I talked about this a couple weeks ago about the schedule for the meetings, and you already mentioned that at the March meeting we're definitely encouraging full participation in person. What did we decide on the other meetings? We'll continue to do hybrid for each of the meetings. So all of the meetings this year we'll do in hybrid, but we really do encourage you to be here in person if possible. Is everybody okay if we continue with this location? I think this seems pretty central. If anybody has a different feeling, we're happy to rotate around as long as you've got the equipment to do a hybrid meeting. But it looks like we're getting a lot of head nods, so we'll continue to. Oh, Bartley has a comment.
Yeah, Boyd, is it on? This is Bartley with Davis County.
There you go.
I like the fact too, if we have it here all the time, everyone knows it's always at West Point. That's just kind of programmed in.
Great. Anybody online have any comments about meeting location? Okay. Okay. Yes.
If anybody else missed the roll, please come sign it, and appreciate it. Oh, great.
How do the ones
Yes.
online sign the roll? Guess we got them recorded.
If you're online, we've probably got a screenshot of the attendees online. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Is there any other business that needs to come forward? Turn that on. It takes just a couple of seconds for it to. There you go.
Sorry, I was going to mention this prior to my presentation, but I biked out here from the Clearfield Front Runner Station, and major thanks to whoever's keeping the SR93 trail clear of snow, especially behind the sound wall, right, which puts a big shadow on it. But I was really impressed that in Clearfield and West Point, right, totally clear and amazing way for me to get here from the Front Runner Station. So thanks, and please pass that along to whoever's responsible for that. It's really awesome.
Yeah, we can do that. It's our a lot of help from the rain, but our public works guys do go out and plow those trails. I think they do the same in Clearfield. Yeah, they do a great job. So yeah, glad to use the trail. Yeah, if there's no other business, we'll see you on February 22nd here at the same place. Thanks, everybody.